Esto
Morning, everyone. Um, Welcome to our open classroom. We're going to start with a land acknowledgement. San Francisco State is located on the occupied territories of the Rameto Ohlone and the coastal Miwok, along with the Southern Pomo, are organized as the Federated Indians of Graton Rancheria. We are fully committed to the right of land back and exercise of the right of return for all indigenous and displaced people. The United States is enabling and directly involved in the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people and many other people, past and present. Just as our land acknowledgement reminds us that we conduct the university's business on the basis of genocidal dispossession in Turtle Island and complicity with another on the land of Palestine. It is also an urgent reminder that it is not too late for us to stand against the genocide in Palestine and anywhere in the world. We ask everyone to join us for a moment of silence to honor and pay condolences to the people of Iran, the most recent martyr, Ali Larijani. South Lebanon has been bombarded as much as Palestine, including university professors and those who have been killed in Venezuela. We honor all the martyrs who have fallen in Venezuela, Gaza, the streets of Minneapolis, LA, and elsewhere in the United States, Congo, Sudan, South Africa, Lebanon, Puerto Rico, Kashmir, anywhere and everywhere around the world. We honor everybody, and we also remember the martyrs who have fallen a long time ago, the martyrs who have fallen for our people's struggle, the martyrs who continue to fall day in and day out.
Uh, Good morning, Sabah al Khair, and buenos dias, wherever you are. Welcome to our open classroom today, which is titled From Gaza and Beirut to Caracas and Tehran, Resisting Imperialism, Zionism and Genocide. We welcome all of you and around the world, as well as our amazing guests, and we will be having a discussion today about that. And I have several screens, so I'm trying to navigate them all. Tomorrow will be the Eid al-Fitr, the end of Ramadan. And as we know, US and Israel never mind that, and they always start bombing and campaigns against people uh, during Ramadan, during summer, during the Eid, and so on. And so we know today that the families, and especially mothers and fathers, at the Shajara Tayyiba Elementary School in Menab in Iran, and other martyrs, including the family of the Prime Minister of Iran, Ali Larijani, and many of the university professors at LAU, Lebanese American University, who were martyred inside the university, and many people, as Laith said, in the south of Lebanon, in Gaza, everywhere, as well as the people who were defending the presidential palace and uh, Caracas, and the president, and Celia Flores in Caracas were martyred. They, all of them, their families are now coming together and mourning their loved ones. In Muslim communities, I know at least in Palestine, Muslims go to the cemetery to visit the graves of the loved ones and think of them. And for me, I know that my family tomorrow will do that. And I just received yesterday photos from my cousin who went and put palm on the graves of our family there. The image from our second open classroom, which was from the knapsacks of the children in Shajarat Tayyiba school, with their blood on them, reminded me of the pictures that I saw. There are a lot of pictures from Gaza, from Lebanon, from elsewhere in the world, but they reminded me specifically of the images I saw in 2002, when I went back to Nablus, Palestine, during the Aqsa Intifada and the Israeli invasion of Nablus and other Palestinian cities. And in the old city of Nablus, in Hosh al an Israeli personnel carrier drove over the families there, especially the family of Shu'bi family. even though people, the neighbors told them to stop, there is a family underneath. There were 8 members of the family. They killed them all, including the Mrs. Shelby, who was 8 months pregnant, and killed them. Then when we went to visit, which was a week afterwards, and we visited there, the rebel was still there, and there was the books and the knapsacks of the kids were still there. And we were told that the neighbors next door, the children who play with them and go to school, we were asking, where are they? Because they hadn't comprehended what was going on. And there are many, many stories like this about the children who are being bombed and killed. We know that there are adults and there are women and men, where are elderly people who are killed. When you hear stories about the children, it has an effect. And we will talk about that maybe if we are able today, or maybe we will be able to talk about that if we have time. Laith, I want to turn it to you to recognize the people who have helped us. Go ahead, please.
Hi, we just want to thank everyone who made this open classroom possible, our co-sponsors, uh, Fire This Time movement, the Venezuela Solidarity Network, and the Platform for Palestine, along with Teaching Palestine and Ahmed Studies.
And I want to also thank and appreciate Laith, who has been amazingly helpful in doing the work that we are now. I don't want to introduce Laith. I'd like Laith to introduce themselves. And Alison, who also will be introducing themselves, as well as Sina Rahmani, who is not with us, but who has also helped us a lot with the media and ideas about it. Before I advertise, talk about the event and contextualize it, I would like to call on all the people here on the screen to introduce yourself. I'll call on each person just to say a couple of words of how you introduce yourself and contextualize yourself. So, and then we will go into even deeper introductions with our panelists here, and we will run this as a conversation. I will raise some questions, and people, our guests I go between guests, panelists, and comrades, different titles, and so on. So that don't mind. This is a conversation that we're having. The most important thing is we talk with each other, and we are able to deliver what we want to say. So we would like to have everybody come and speak about it. And so I will. I don't know why. Oh, all right. I keep getting the flyer. I don't know why. Okay, here it is. Okay, so I will start with Laith, because also Laith would like to start too, so they can get off the screen and just pay attention, not completely, but pay attention to the way this discussion is going on. So Laith, go ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laith Galoom. I am an Iranian American graduate student at the University of Minnesota. I'm writing about queer Iranian diaspora, and it's kind of taken on a different form, kind of with recent events in Iran. And so I'm writing a little bit about this current moment among the diaspora in Los Angeles. And I will turn it back to you.
You graduate students at University of Minnesota, right? In Minneapolis, where ICE is going on. And okay, and then I would like to call on where is Alison? I don't see Alison.
Alison just briefly
Stepped
disconnected.
out. Okay, Andriana, would you please? And am I saying it correct, Andriana? Yes. Okay, please go ahead, and you'll say it, and then I'll yeah. Please go
Yes,
ahead.
hi
Go
everyone.
ahead.
Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Andreina Chavez. I am a Venezuelan journalist. I was born in Zulia State, which is Western Venezuela. I studied social communications and I specialize in writing in the University of Zulia. And currently I live in Caracas. I have been living in Caracas for maybe 10 years now, mostly because I wanted to be able to report about Venezuela's political situation on the ground from the political capital of Venezuela. So that's what I do. I've dedicated my entire journalistic career to speak about Venezuela's anti-imperialist struggle. I grew up with the Venezuelan Bolivarian Revolution, so I have been just following everything that has happened in Venezuela in the past 25 years.
Thank you. And by the way, just so for people to know, the minute people start speaking, we will have the bios on posted, so you can learn more, and you can learn more about our speaker as we go along. Christian.
Okay. Hello, comrades. Thank you for having me. It's almost a bit hard to speak out myself after those stories. Truly heartbreaking, but I am. Comrades call me Pitch. I live here in Miranda, this beautiful state of Venezuela. I actually live in one of the bombed communities of the 3rd of January, La Bollera. This is where I've been my whole life. This is where I am. If I can say anything, I'm a militant, I'm a Maroon, I'm a Chavista, deeply Bolivarian, that understands the geopolitics that are occurring now. Part of the Afro-Venezuelan National Cumbi and the Cumbe and the International Platform for Solidarity with Palestine. And I hope we can have a great conversation because in this moment it is greatly needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Alison.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Alison Bodine. I'm phoning in from the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I am a founding member of the Venezuela Solidarity Network, which is a US-Canada network of organizations and individuals defending Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination and demanding US hands-off Venezuela, work that is more important now than ever before. And I'm also with Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice, an organization based here in Canada with a newspaper and active work in solidarity with Palestine, Venezuela, Cuba, and other just causes. And it is my pleasure to be with you all here today. Just to say, I've been to Venezuela over a dozen times since 2018 and written extensively about my experiences, including a book called Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Venezuela, published by Battle of Ideas Press.
Thank you. And if you can, any links you have, anything, please share them with us so we can put them online and share with the people who are watching so they can also read. And last but not least, Dr. Lina Tabbal, who is joining us from Lebanon. And of course, we are very happy to have you, especially for me as a Palestinian, with the unity of blood between Palestinians and Lebanese. So please go ahead. You're muted.
Je dis merci. Can I speak Arabic or French and just translate?
I wish you told me before. Okay, go ahead. بالعربي.
بالعربي؟ No. أنا اسمي لينا طبال من لبنان، ساكنة بباريس، فرنسية لبنانية ومختصة بالقانون الدولي، وكمان يعني مشاركة منذ عشرات السنين بالدفاع عن قضايا المعتقلين الفلسطينيين وخاصة مروان البرغوثي، وأيضا هناك معتقلين لبنانيين يعني.
For sure. My name is Lina Tabbar. I'm Lebanese and Lebanese French. I live in Paris, and I'm specialized in international studies, and I'm specifically working on the rights of political prisoners, and specifically the case of Marwan Barghouti, the Palestinian political prisoner. Go ahead. كملي.
وكمان شاركت يعني بالدفاع عن معتقلين لبنانيين في السجون الإسرائيلية، وشاركت بأسطول الصمود اللي انطلق لكسر حصار غزة بشهر سبتمبر، واعتقلت في سجن كتسعود كمان لمدة تقريبا أسبوع.
Okay, and I also defend Lebanese prisoners in Israeli jails, and I've many of them, and I also participated in the Sumud flotilla that went to break the blockade against Gaza, and I was arrested by the Israelis and spent a week in Ketsaot prison, which was called the Nafha. That's where they started it actually in what is called the first Intifada. I'm adding, which is the Intifada of the Stone in the 80s. It was open for Palestinian, not open, but arranged for Palestinian prisoners. And so she spent a week there. Okay. Okay,
It's
خلاص؟
yes.
shukran. Okay, now what I would like, I forgot I was going to say something. Yeah, I wanted to actually say my name is Rabab Abdul Hadi. I'm the director and senior scholar of the Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies program at San Francisco State University. But we are launching today the open classroom, this open classroom in the name of teaching Palestine pedagogical praxis and the indivisibility of justice, because San Francisco State University canceled my class on Islamophobia. So this is not part, unfortunately, part of the classroom. And because of the class was canceled, unfortunately, it's the only class throughout the whole university on Islamophobia. And they canceled it, and they came up with all sorts of reason and technicalities and so on, saying we don't have enough students. Mind you, classes on Israeli studies run with 3 or 5 students and so on. But that's the way it works at San Francisco State. We decided to continue to try to run as many open classrooms as possible. We thought we'll try to do 5 during Ramadan. That's why they're called Ramadaniyat. But the first class we had to postpone it because there was a strike by the Teamster Union, which is a union that is at our university, California State University. So we honored our colleagues, and so we decided not to cross the picket line. We delayed the first 1 week, so we ended up with 4 open classrooms, and the first one was on Islamophobia, enemy, alien, and ICE. And we discussed many issues, and one was the one that I want to highlight is the question of how there is arrest, deportation that has been going on for quite a while against people, many people, including what we're seeing today, and many people from Venezuela as well, from Arab world. And there is continuous ways in which the U.S. government comes up with reasons using this very old law called enemy alien from 1798, and which Trump promised to use it when in his inaugural speech. And but he applies it, he uses different discourse when he speaks about immigrants from Latin America and when he speaks about immigrants from our regions, in order to divide and conquer. We believe this is and actually it was used in Second World War to the kidnap Japanese from Latin American origins, and take them across the border to the U.S. and place them in concentration camps, incarceration camps, along with Japanese from the United States under the law of enemy alien. And so we usually every year we organize with the Japanese community a day in the day of remembrance that the Japanese community does, which we couldn't do also on February 19th because of the strike. We honored the strike, so we did it then. But also this has been used now in the case of immigrants that are being deported, also in the case of students who are active on Palestine. So we hosted Mamadou Tel, who's graduate PhD student at Cornell University, who self-deported to Cairo before they came to his house to become ICE agents. And we spoke about the case of Liqa Kurdiya, who is an activist, a Palestinian woman activist who went and attended one of the protests at Columbia University, and she was arrested on March 8th, but nobody was like speaking about her and so on. We hosted her lawyer, Amal Thabita, and one of the active advocates in the community, Layla Al-Haddad. Probably many people know her, the Gaza Kitchen. She's and she lost 200 members of her family in Gaza. And so they spoke about her and advocated about her. I'm happy to say that this past week, Liqa Kurdi actually was released. So she's back home and she's with her family, and we're hoping to have her here. And the second one, U.S. and Israel had attacked Iran. So we geared the whole discussion on Iran. And we spoke also about the kidnapping of President Maduro and Celia Flores. And we brought in colleagues and scholars who work on Iran, analyzed them, and spoke about them. The last one was on actually the old and new crusade, talking about the arm of the Minister of War, Secretary of War, is actually real. We're not calling him Secretary of War the way we say Israel Defense Forces. No, Israel Offense Forces. It's actually Trump called him the Secretary of War, and he has all these tattoos on his arm from honoring the Crusades, and they've been so almost half of the government in the U.S. is Christian, white Christian races, and have maybe Christian Zionists. So there is all this kind of, and they appeal to Christianity and religion, although we argue against it and we say this is not about religion. This is about using religion to weaponize to for imperialist and colonial and greed reasons and so on, as we see in our, and we will be talking about that. And we had professors, Iranian scholars who are specializing in medieval studies and modern Iranian history, and also gender and sexuality, to speak about that. And this is the last, actually the fourth and the last one, because tomorrow is the Eid. So this is the last day of Ramadan, which we call it in Arabic Yom al-Waqf. So so we're really happy to have you. We're really happy to have people who can actually speak about this and address it and explain it to our students and our audiences. This is the class to compensate. It's not enough to compensate 16 weeks with 4, but we try our best, and we try what we can, and we do open classrooms, and we invite open classroom. We invite people from outside of the classes and outside of the university to attend for free, because we believe in free education, and we believe in having the students interact with the community as well as with scholars outside, and having the knowledge exchange and so on, because there is a lot of knowledge is being built and compiled outside of the classroom, much faster than scholars can write books, and the books sometimes do not capture everything. So we think this is really important. Also, sometimes in the US in particular, most of the knowledge it doesn't get reported in the media from the eyes of the colonized people, from the eyes of the, so, but you're going to be saying today it gets reported in media of the people, but it doesn't get reported by CNN, NBC, CBS, of course not Fox. So it's really important to be able to tell these stories and to discuss them, and analyze as well, because it's not only the stories, but it's also the analysis of them, and show the comparative analysis. So everything is not the same, but there are similarities. What happens, and then also connect it with what to do. It's not only what happened, what scholarship we do, how to teach about it, and then what is all this knowledge that we produce? Where do we go? What do we do with it? Where do we go afterwards? So this is basically what teaching Palestine is all about, and this historical moment calls on us that we need. It's our job as people who produce knowledge to share the knowledge with everybody and engage in this discussion. So this is what we're doing today. So what we're going to discuss. So from the kidnapping of President Maduro and Celia Flores, to the bombing and the attack, the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, and to the assassinations, which is something is not it's not one time. This is sort of part of the repertoire of the colonialists and imperialists, and they also assassinated many people in Lebanon, in Palestine, almost leaders, and so on. So we want to talk: is it just hatred? What else? Why else is this happening? To the connection, to the whole question of the place of oil, whether we're talking about Venezuela, we're talking about Iran, and to the demands of Zionism, the goals of Zionism about Palestine. We want to discuss all of these issues. So I'm just throwing it. We've mentioned it to you, but we just like let points come in. And this past weekend, Alison and I were at a conference, past the conference on Cuba, and we started talking about, so what do we need to do? Because now, so I maybe start with the context of what's happening. What are we expecting, Alison? Just talk about that, and we go to Dr. Tabbal and talk about what is happening. What are we doing as Arab women? So talk about the petition, and then we'll come back and talk about how are these uh, issues connected. So each person start with like 5 minutes, and then we will go to the next question. Unless things intersect with each other, so we'll jump all over to make sure we cover all as much as we can. So, Alison, do you want to start, please? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Thank you, Dr. Rabab. There is so many deep connections, I think, both historically and today between the Trump administration's attack on Iran and bombing of Iran and the January 3rd attack on Venezuela and the kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores. As you pointed out, I think the most significant that I want to emphasize is, of course, the response of us, of people living, as they say in Latin America, the belly of the beast. So North America, Canada, Europe, countries that are involved in attacking developing countries like Iran and Venezuela, or, and our solidarity being needed more now than ever. It seems that we are having to open many different anti-war fronts, anti-imperialist fronts. It is an extension of the movements that have been taking place in solidarity with the resilient people of Palestine, of course, for the last more than 100 years that they've been fighting colonization, but especially since October 7th, 2023, and the people's movement that has emerged in solidarity with the Palestinian people and the people of Gaza. So I think the most important characteristic I'd like to say of this moment that we are in is the necessity to build this more united and stronger anti-war movement, especially in the countries that are carrying out these brutal attacks, like the United States, or here where I'm speaking from, just a few miles north in Canada, a country that likes to pretend that they are not in support of the US's foreign policy and brutality, but is really with the United States in every attack, including that against Venezuela and the current bombing campaign against Iran, as well as the sustained genocide against the people of Palestine and Gaza. In 2025, following the Israeli bombing of Iran in the 12-day war, President Nicolas Maduro, who's now been kidnapped by the United States government and is sitting in a prison in Brooklyn in New York City, spoke about this attack. He spoke against the bombing of Iran at that time, and spoke with such clarity that I think is important to reiterate, because it establishes just how well understood Venezuela's connection to the axis of resistance, to the countries that are fighting against imperialism, has been and continues to be. And the sentiment, which we'll hear later from both Andreina and Christian, of the people of Venezuela, their strong support for Palestine and Iran and all countries under US attack. President Maduro explained the attack on Iran at that time last year as, quote, not a reflection of a religious conflict, but rather an imperialist war against the indigenous people of the area, continuing the aggression initiated against Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iraq. And went further on to explain that, quote, it's an imperialist war to destroy peoples, to impose its colonial military rule, order, and obedience. Of course, 10 months later or so, we've seen the brutality expand from the US government as the declining imperialism of the United States, the declining position of the US as a world power becomes clearer and clearer. Their lashing out has come in full force against people of Venezuela, people of Palestine, and the people of Iran at this moment. And I think really the attacks on Latin America are a direct reflection of the United States attempting to regain hegemony in the Western Hemisphere. And Venezuela is the linchpin of that hegemony. That is why in August of 2025, the US sent the largest naval fleet into the Caribbean, prepared for 5 months to carry out a bombing campaign and brutal kidnapping, and has targeted Venezuela for more than 25 years, ever since Venezuela chose to have an independent foreign policy to express and establish its right to self-determination and independence and sovereignty, which is where I will end kind of my initial comments on this discussion, which is that I think we are in a position of not only needing to build an urgent anti-war movement against continued US attacks and to actively make the links between attacks in West Asia and attacks in Latin America, but also urgently build and strengthen our movement in defense of the sovereignty and self-determination of oppressed nations. And that applies especially for Venezuela today and Iran. And so I just wanted to kind of close my initial comments with that, and I really look forward to hearing from everyone else. That when it comes to specific, I know our next speaker is going to talk about the kidnapping of President Maduro and Celia Flores by the United States and the necessary response. But I will just say they continue to be in U.S. prison since January 3rd. We've come to learn that they are being held in solitary confinement, although we know that their health is, basically as good as it can be from within U.S. prison walls. Our active solidarity and campaigning for immediate freedom for President Maduro and Celia Flores must also be part of this movement for sovereignty, in support of sovereignty and self-determination. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Yes, we're going to talk specifically about the kidnapping and also what's happening to them now and what's going on. I wanted to maybe go to Andrina and follow up on the whole question of what from you're based in Venezuela and you're still there. So if you can also talk about the ways in which people in Venezuela are like receiving this, where then, and how are they receiving this, and also how they are receiving the news about the bombing of Iran as well as the Palestine. I know that Christian, you also work on Palestine solidarity, but I would like to also hear from Andrina, who is a journalist. So please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I agree with everything Alison was saying, and I just want to reiterate something that she was talking about, the connection of Nicolas Maduro and his kidnapping with Palestine and Iran. Nicolas Maduro was one of the most consistent supporters of the Palestinian people. Venezuela didn't have diplomatic relations with Israel since 2009 because Hugo Chavez broke those relations, calling Israel what it was, a Zionist genocidal state. And Nicolas Maduro continued that legacy, and he was a strong supporter of the Palestinian people. He advocated constantly for the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and to become a state. Every speech that Venezuela has made inside the United Nations has always advocated for the Palestinian people. During the genocide in Gaza that we saw live on our phones since 2023, Nicolas Maduro was one of the first people, one of the first leaders in the world who called it for what it was. He said, this isn't a religious war, this is a conflict. And the Palestinian people didn't initiate this. This is a fascist, genocidal, U.S. White supremacy and U.S. imperialist war against the indigenous people of Palestine. And he was very upfront about the fact that that the United States was behind all of this, that this was a colonization project for the United States. And he was very upfront about the fact that the United Nations and the entire international system was completely obsolete, Like they have become completely irrelevant at this point because they weren't doing anything to stop a genocide that we were all seeing. He was the one of the first people who also said that we needed to start sending international brigades to Gaza, farmers, doctors, construction workers, people to help rebuild Gaza, to help rebuild Palestine, to help the Palestinian people take back the land. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Nicolas Maduro was kidnapped in the way that he was. Um, I think we often see these things as coincidences, but they're not. They needed to take out a voice that was so important for the Palestinian people, like it was Nicolas Maduro. Um, and also, the whole kidnapping, the way that it has impacted Venezuela since it happened. Many people ask me this question, and I always say that we have a bit of a duality here in Venezuela. On one side, the Venezuelan people is very resilient. The Venezuelan people has resisted so many U.S. attacks, U.S. sanctions, U.S. economic asphyxiation, so many destabilization attempts, that we have built this resistance within ourselves, that we continue to live, we continue to try to enjoy life, we continue to try to build our political and economic and cultural movements, like the communal movement that we have here in Venezuela. We continue to try to build a socialist society despite anything, despite everything that is happening here. So ever since the kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro, I have seen a Chavista people, a grassroots organizations that are more determined than ever to continue in the legacy of Hugo Chavez, to continue the legacy of Nicolas Maduro, to continue building a society that is different from what the United States has envisioned, which is just colonialism. They are determined to continue to defend Venezuelan sovereignty and Venezuela's right to have sovereignty over its own resources. On the other side, we still see people constantly going to the streets and just expressing different kinds of solidarity with Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores and Iran and Palestine, connecting all of these issues. There is always some cultural movement happening. There is always something happening in the streets, so people can continue to show support for President Maduro, but also support for Venezuela's current government that we know it is right now negotiated with an invisible gun to their head, just trying to maintain Venezuela safe and trying to recover President Maduro and Celia Flores from that prison that they are in the United States. So the way the Venezuelan people has taken everything that has happened since January 3rd, it is one, we are just doing everything we can to maintain Chavista morale high. We're doing everything we can to continue to build the project that we believe it is the future of humanity, which is socialism. And at the same time, we are determined to continue fighting to recover President Maduro, to recover Celia Flores, but also to recover Venezuela from this extortion that we are under the United States. So I think that's mostly the comment that I want to make right now.
This is wonderful. Yeah, I do. I want to come back and ask you about the Chavezista and the whole Bolivarianismo ideology and the ways in which Venezuela developed it, and how people think about it, but also I kind of like, where is it at, and why is it that the U.S. picked on and how picked on Venezuela, and how they also framed it, and how this is also part of the history that they've done that, and why kidnap a president, kind of like forget about their own excuses, but why they kidnapped the president, but maybe come back and talk about that. But I wanted to say that when the Israeli bombing of Gaza in 2012 happened, it was Chavez was so supportive of Palestine. So the Palestinians were joking, saying that Chavez is the best Palestinian president. I mean, everybody knew he was Venezuelan, but they kept saying best Palestinian president. And I will just share an anecdote that my first roommate in college was actually a Venezuelan woman who was a fencing champion, and I still remember her name. I don't know where she is. Alba Marquez Rene. It was the first one in college. So this is something that is really interesting. But I would like us to talk about that and the ways in which Venezuela was actually very, very supportive, and come back and talk about how the Latin American space, or maybe if you would like to start on that, Christian, and we'll come back. But I also want you to explain. You said I'm a Moron. Can explain that. Explain what it is, because I don't think people who are joining us necessarily everybody knows what it is. So please go ahead. Floor is yours.
Okay, I think there's so many things to say on this topic. If there's something I want to start with, is that one definitive way to understand what is going on, what has happened, especially in this hemisphere of the world, is that we are facing the huge contradiction between the doctrine of Monroe and the doctrine of Bolivar. That is in the essence of what I'm going to explain. What is a maroon? In Spanish, we say cimarrones, el cimarronaje. It is the people that were enslaved during colonial times, after the Atlantic slave trade, in this case to this part of the continent, and they were freed by themselves by struggle, and they started organizing within the cumbes, which you can see, for example, in the like, for example, any of the Maroons, the cities in Jamaica. You can see the Manieles, you can see the Palenques, Quilombos. These were organizations that Jesus Chucho Garcia describes within 5 axes of work, which is judicial Maronage. You can see this, for example, in how the Cumbe de Curiepe wrote letters officially to Francisco de Miranda and to the Crown of Spain to gain certain amount of independence that they did regain in that moment during the struggle. You have Frontal Cimarronage, which is the military organization of the enslaved people, where they organize themselves to fight back, take land, build more cumbes like the Rey Miguel and Jose Leonardo Chirinos did. You have Spiritual Cimarronage, which of course is, for example, voodoo in Haiti, which is the Yoruba tradition that has been so well kept. Here I have my Eshu or Elegua collar that I always carry with me for protection. You have cultural cimarronage that you see every day in the dancing of tambor that you see in Resistance, that we connect so well with the Afro diaspora. And you have and Afroepistemology. But yeah, to explain that shortly, why is it important now? Because what we are seeing, what we're facing as Afro-Venezuelan communities, that ever since the aggression, because as was very well said before, this aggression has been ongoing for these 27 years of Bolivarian revolution, like no doubt. 100 years of subjugation to the United States by the oligarchy of Venezuela, that when faced with true Bolivarian ideals that wanted sovereignty, not just as a state nation, because we need to understand Venezuela as an international project. When you see things like the Amphictyonic Congress of Panama in 1826, that's going to turn 200 years this year, when you see aspects like the concept of Our America, first proposed by Francisco de Miranda, then expanded by Bolivar through the idea of the equilibrium of the universe, and then you see Jose Martí saying, like, this Patria Grande that is proposed is all of humanity, Patria Grande es humanidad. These 27 years of revolution have been the rising that was just awaiting to occur against the Monroe Doctrine that was impending all of our America. This is why Venezuela is in the center of this conflict, especially with the resources that we possess. And this is why it's so important for Maronage, for Cimarrones, to face this conflict directly. First of all, when the aggression escalated in the Caribbean Sea, one of the most affected communities was the fisher folk of the coast of Venezuela. And who are the fisher folk of the coast of Venezuela? It is the Black communities in Venezuela. It is the Afro-Venezuelan communities. And many of the communities that were bombed, like Higuerote, like La Guaira, like etc., of the 3 states that were bombed during the January 3rd aggression, are very like majority of Afro-Venezuelan communities, because we're in the coast, because we live in the coast. And so our understanding of Bolivarianism within the context of what we saw, what we're experiencing, and what we know as the Venezuelan people is part of the struggle that we face, not only from today, but since 27 years ago, make it so Maronage is such an important identity to uphold during these times. It's a complex topic to speak about briefly. But truly, just as you were saying about what it means to have Bolivarianism within your ideals, I think one way I is so important to explain. Andreina was talking about the communes, is that um, Chavez once said that Bolivar's project no longer depended on a person; it depended on the people. And this is so important to understand because within Venezuela, we believe in something called the communal state in transition to socialism. And in the geopolitical actions that were being taken by the governance of Venezuela within the major project of Bolivarianism, communes were at the center of this. Venezuelan communes, we have 5,336 communes and communal circuits that since 2006 have been gaining a lot of power to start displacing the bourgeois state. Of course, in contradiction, of course, in construction, of course, there's communes much more organized than others, but this is what we're building. We're building it from here, from this corner of the world. And it was crucial, for example, to break with the oil capitalist industry international wide, which is what Chavez was attempting to do first with the OPEP, then with the 2006 2007 oil law, and then that we kept on building on through things like Petrocaribe, which is such an incredible project to study in understanding energy sovereignty, which is not something that is just from now, that just Chavez popped it out of his head perfectly, like Lenin said, like Minerva from the head of Jupiter. No, no, no. Bolivar spoke about energy problems as well. The Chuquisaca decree portrays it perfectly. And in the context of, for example, such a good ally of the Bolivarian Republic in that moment, which was Haiti, they spoke about land reforms because they understood that energy was going to be a central conflict with the empires. In that moment, Chavez understood this perfectly, and he said, we happen to have the biggest oil reserve right in the planet right now. We need to build sovereignty through the people. But how do we do that? We propose the commune. And I say we because it was vanguard operations like comrade Alison Bowden has actually a beautiful mural in her image that is of the Socialist Panal Commune 2021 with the patriotic force Alexis Vive, which was one of the vanguard projects that proposed themselves as communes based on the Paris Commune before Chavez said in 2009, this is what we're going to do as a project. This is what Bolivarianism was truly about from the beginning. And this is what we're upholding now. Cumbes, these cities built by enslaved people, have turned into cumbe communes. Indigenous communities are aligning themselves with the communal ideals. We started building this in Venezuela, and Nicolas Maduro said geopolitics need to be communal. Geopolitics need to come from the popular base, and then they strike. When they see that Venezuela is growing 9%, the biggest economic growth in the region for 2 consecutive years, they strike. They kidnap Nicolas Maduro because they couldn't handle the growth of Chavismo and the strength that we were building in a Bolivarian project that is by nature always internationalist. That's to start, but there is so much more to talk about. But thank you.
Thank you. I was thinking in my mind that we definitely have to have a discussion. I teach a class called Comparative Border Studies, Palestine and Mexico, and we haven't because of all this repression and the cancellation of the Islamophobia class and the need to do open classrooms, and then the war on Iran and the U.S.-Israeli war and the kidnapping of President Maduro. A lot of the stuff that I had planned before we couldn't accomplish, but I would really like us to talk more about that, because people don't understand what is also the ideological war. Because I do remember when Chavez came to the United Nations and brought, forget about Chomsky's relationship with Epstein and so on, but he brought Chomsky's book and banged the stage of the United Nations when he was speaking, and said, "This is, you need to read this," and so on. It's very interesting to compare, to contrast now here, and to contrast the Chavez and Maduro and the thinking and the reading and the knowledge production and so on with the current president of the United States. And you can't even ask, what is he reading? What is he reading? And what does he know about the world and so on? And it's kind of like, this is where people who are knowledgeable and always are humble, they think they don't know enough, and somebody who doesn't even read or engaged in production of knowledge and so on, is always claiming that he knows everything about the world and he can assess it. So, but I think also Bolivarismo, right? And to talk about that, and then you're talking about the Paris Commune, and I think it would be really important to talk about this, because to discuss with you, because nobody actually knows about that, and I bet you majority of students do not know about the Maroon. I've learned about that a lot from Cuba, presentations by Moronis, in Cuba. People who explain and talked about the revolutions and running to the mountains to be able to fight. And I think this is really important also, and even connecting that also with the revolution in Haiti and independence of the first African Republic. And so I think that all of these things are not learned and are not known. And so when somebody says our backyard, the US, the, the Caribbean, Latin America is our backyard, people will say, oh, maybe it's not so nice, but it's okay. Don't understand the colonialist, the racist colonialist discourse that's part of it, that actually really needs to be understood and dissected. So folks understand why is it that there is such a huge attack on curriculum, such a huge campaign to remove all of the stuff from the US schools, to not let students who are growing up after a lot of the transformation of knowledge, transformation of life, transformation of things. They don't want these things to be part of the curriculum. They don't want kids to be able to learn about that. So I think this is really very important. But I want to now move to Dr. Tabal and ask about the connection between between the attack on Venezuela and the attack on Lebanon and Iran, and also the petition that we started to demand the release of Celia Flores, and anything you want to talk about that within your opening remarks. Fadali.
I will try to speak. You hear me?
English.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you get stuck with any words, I'll fill it in. Okay.
But my accent is French, so please understand.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're good. You're excellent. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. The war unfolding in the Middle East today cannot be understood simply as a set of separate confrontation between Israel and Iran, or between Israel and Lebanon, or even as a direct consequence of shift in American domestic politics with the return of Donald Trump to the center of political power in America. It must be read, rather, it must read within a broader structure of United States imperial hegemony in which Israel function and advanced military outposts in the region, while the United States manages the wider strategic framework, the
restriction, yeah,
of region by force, the dismantling of center of resistance in Lebanon, in Palestine, and the prevention of any autonomous regional balance of power from voilà, in our region. In this context, Iran is not continent or accidental target. It is targeted because it represents an American and Israeli strategies thinking a state that has not been fully integrated into the regional order of compliance. Any escalation against Iran should be interpreted merely through the language of nuclear file or security tension. It must be understood as part of a longer project, political and strategic configuration. The same applies to Lebanon, which has never been merely a secondary area, but has historically constituted a permanent site of confrontation between project of domination and project of resistance. Israel attacked Lebanon, the occupation of Lebanon territory, the destruction of South Lebanon, southern village of Lebanon, and the constant violation of Lebanese sovereignty, sovereignty.
Sovereignty. I can't answer. So yeah.
Sovereignty. And the destruction of Beirut, of a border attempt to transform Lebanon into a political space striped of autonomy, resistance, and the capacity to refuse externally imposed arrangement. Israel cannot be viewed simply as a state acting according to the familiar doctrine of self-defense. As Western official discourse persistently claims, it must be analyzed as a central instrument within a broader colonial and imperial architecture. It were not be consolidated and regional order in which Arab people with Palestinian and its core are kept in condition of permanent fragmentation and exhaustion. For this reason, the war in Gaza, the aggression against Lebanon, south of Lebanon and Beirut, and the permanent directory in Iran are not separate document. They are multiple expressions of single doctrine, the enforcement of Israeli supremacy as one of the pillars of American hegemony in the region. When Donald Trump is introduced into this analytic, what becomes visible and is not a rupture with U.S. foreign political, but a more explicit expression of its underlying logic. Trump does not invent empire. He removed all the diplomatic mask. He articulated openly and clearly what the administration often to address in the language of international law, stability or security. Under Trump, unconditional alignment with Israel appears without ambiguity, and the Middle East is treated and as open laboratory for the exercise of raw power, public threats, maximum pressure, punitive sanction, and war justified as instrument for restoring discipline to a region that continues to resist submission. What deserves equal attention, however, is that American logic do not stop at the Middle East. When we turn to Latin America, when encounters the same pattern, the punishment of state that refuse obedience, their economic strangulation,
Obedience, right? Yeah.
obeisance, their economic strangulation, their political isolation, and when necessary, the overturning of their sovereignty, of abduction of all their leader. From this perspective, the abduction of President Maduro, cannot be treated as purely Latin America event detached from the wider global order. It belongs to the same geopolitical that links Caracas to Gaza, Beirut to Tehran, to Syria, to Iraq, to all the Moyen-Orient, ou bien la globe terrestre, sur tout le monde.
The Middle East.
All the world, yes. All the Middle East and all the world. The Trump, ou bien the empire that refuse Venezuelan sovereignty is the same empire that endorses the destruction of Gaza, support aggression against Lebanon, and treat Iran as a structural enemy, not simply because of military calculation, but because it rejects to role assigned to subordinate state. The connection between the Middle East and Latin America is therefore not merely rhetorical, nor does it belong only the moral language of solidarity. It is an analytical necessary. The people targeted today, whether in Palestine, Lebanon, Iran, or Venezuela, are targeted because in different regions in the world, they represent obstacle to imperial ordering. The language differ, the geographic differ, but the mechanism of punishment remain remarkably similar. Sanction, media demonization, economic warfare, political destabilization, and when these instruments fail, direct violence. To read the war in the Middle East strong the price of Trump and the United States then requires that we avoid the narrow frameworks that reduce everything to regional conflict, security crisis, or competition for influence. What we are facing is a structure of low intensity global war managed strong different instruments again all those who stand outside the logic of obedience. Within this framework, Palestine is not an isolated issue. Lebanon is not simply a border front, and Iran is not a nuclear adversary, and Venezuela is not just a case of domestic instability in Latin America Latina. They are all sites within a single struggle over sovereignty, over the right to refuse American dictates, and over whether alternative political future remain possible. The intellectual and political test today, therefore, is not only to condemn each war separately, but to reconstruct a comprehensive understanding that links these fronts are different as different manifestations of the same global order, an order that becomes more violent precisely as its historical dominance become more fragile. There is one conclusion that must be emphasized. It is that the war in the Middle East, from Gaza to Lebanon to Iran, cannot be separated from the war against sovereignty in Latin America, nor from the border to break every political model that refuse incorporation into the America-led order. In this sense, the defense of Palestine, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Venezuela is not the defense of disconnection causes. It's the defense of a single principle, the right of people to exist outside the logic of occupation, of American occupation and Israeli occupation and imperial subjugation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kabbal. This was see. I think I'm so glad that you spoke in English, because I could have translated, but I think your words are better that used than me actually doing them. And I think that the analysis. I'm sure that also
But did
the comrade.
you understand my language?
Yes, yes, I understand, but yeah, I understand 100%. It was, and I think it's much better than me translating for you.
Okay.
And I actually think that this is like really great analysis that you gave. I would like, to have to the second round have, if you would like folks to kind of maybe comment on each other and also extend the discussion. And of course, what you were talking about, I just want to say that we did not name Cuba, but what you are saying is definitely 100% applying to Cuba, and the ways in which the United States, since the Cuban Revolution 1959, has been trying to crush Cuba again and again. It has been also ever since any moments of any resistance and obstacles in the Arab world, in Africa, Asia, Latin America, anywhere, any movement, uprisings challenging the U.S. domination, there is always trying to crush it. And so is Israel, and the relationship between Israel and the U.S. is not new, and it's not something that is instantaneous or accidental. So there is something that we should also talk about, that the relationship between the two, but also the long term goals of both of them, Zionism and imperialism, how they relate to each other, and how they treat the rest of the world, because there is something between the U.S. relationship to Israel and U.S. relationship to many other countries and states and regimes in the third world, that they can be overturned. But the relationship between the U.S. and Israel is very strong. So maybe we can discuss that. And the whole thing that the end of what you said now is the whole, that the attacks and so on, and that the role of the intellectuals and the movements to not understand things as separate from each other, but connected with each other, speaks to all the alliances that have been built in the last century, from the Bandung to the Tricontinental, to various ways in various stage for African Union, Organization of Islamic Conference, etc., which have not been able to do their jobs precisely because the US keeps intervening and undermining them, and Israel does it clandestinely and so on. But I don't want to talk more than the rest of you. I would like maybe the Congress tourists, if you would like to reflect on what Dr. Tabal spoke about, and then go back and speak about what is being done in terms of challenge. What are the discussions? What are the work, and what is happening right now? The second round, because we have 27 minutes left, and we don't have any questions, and I would like us to have maybe 3 to 4 minutes for each person to conclude and leave us 2 3 minutes. Okay, so I would maybe the second round, like maybe 3 to 4 minutes, everybody can respond. So let's reverse the order. Maybe start with Christian, and then go to Andrea, and then Alison, and then go back to Dr. Tabak.
Okay. 3 to 4 minutes, yes. Everything that is being said is crucial.
24 minutes to all of us, not for you, 4 minutes. Okay.
Thank you. It is crucial. Within the geopolitical aspect of what we're seeing, I think the analysis is perfect. And I'm in total agreement. And I want more to add what to do. I think that is something that we're asking constantly. Within the Venezuelan perspective, me and my comrades, and not only my comrades, my neighbors, the people I talk to every day, the people I work with in my commune. So we're always questioning what to do. Sometimes you feel like a grain of sand in the middle of a geopolitical huge conflict, and you're just trying to go through college and your job. And it is possible because I think something a great comrade said, Tania Diaz and Blanque Cap. They say that the bombs haven't stopped falling on top of us because cognitive warfare is at large. When we see the geopolitical conflict and we start understanding that Venezuela has always been an internationalist project since the beginning, the only reason we ever became like a real state nation, this oligarchical aspect of state nation, was through the Constitution of Valencia in 1830. You start understanding that the role of the people, especially in this hemisphere, I'm going to speak from the role of the Venezuelans, and then this is something that I can talk to any student that's watching this, any person that is currently, is that we need to understand that cognitive warfare is at large, and the battle of ideas needs to be our most forward point of, let's say, in a way, confrontation. Like Che would say, the material realities of the people will always be more important than the ideology in establishing the guerrilla warfare. We need to do a guerrilla warfare on cognitive warfare. We need to start building the constant networks of information, so the geopolitical aspect can be understood, that in this hemisphere that is trying to be enclosed by the hegemonical empire, by the oligarchy, by a system that it's not even really about like Trump. It is a system that is imposed through the capitalist structure, through oligarchy, that is trying to destroy us all. Or most important, building as the people of this continent is fighting the battle of ideas, so the people's revolution is unstoppable from now on. Because, like Luis Brito Garcia says, when an idea has come to its time, it can never be stopped. It is, to me, no coincidence that the Amphictyonic Congress of Panama is turning 200 years now. It is no coincidence that after we had seen such a huge growth, and last year I remember all of us were so hopeful, like, yeah, this is going to be the year they kidnapped the president, they killed my neighbors, they destroyed more than 36 homes in my community. And we need to take refuge in the battle of ideas. This means studying texts like Salvador de la Plaza's The Real Situation of Venezuela, and studying Bolivar's Equilibrium of the Universe. This means studying the relation of our America through the lens of what it means to be, in my perspective, that building of 21st century socialism that each country needs to build as their own nation project. For Venezuelans, this is the commune. We need to stay in the commune, we need to fight for the commune, and we need to start bringing the truth of the commune to the countries so they can understand we really do have a revolution. And for you people in the north of this continent, count on us. Count on us to ask, count on us to be there and to fight this fight together, because it's no longer only about the connection of South to South people, but in the geopolitical recomposition that we're witnessing, it is the connection of all the peoples of the world against the oligarchy that is trying to whip us all out of existence. So yeah, there is so much more to talk about on these topics, but I really recommend the Angostura address of Simon Bolivar. I really recommend the speech of 2006 of Chavez, and to keep on struggling, because this is a fight of all of us, and the historic moment is truly witnessing itself. We are seeing the change of history, and we're always constituent political subjects of it, especially now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure we need to have more discussions. For sure, this is not the end, but I'm also hoping that maybe our audience can also give some comments. Okay, Andrina.
Yes, so again, I also agree with Christian that all the analysis have been amazing, and I think I mostly just want to add a few things to everything that has been said. Um, in
You
I think
muted yourself. Okay, yeah,
yes,
yeah. Go ahead.
sorry. So I was saying that in 2015, the United States declared Venezuela an unusual and extraordinary threat. And oftentimes I like to use that phrase because I like to say that it is true that we are a threat to the United States, but not in the way that the United States has made it seem, not in the way that people think. We are a threat because Venezuela, 25 years ago, when Hugo Chavez came to power, we revived Bolivarianism. We revived the ideals of Simon Bolivar. And if you look back in history, Bolivarianism, it is the direct confrontation of the Monroe Doctrine. They were born at the same time. At the same time when Bolivar was liberating countries in Latin America and reinforcing sovereignty and self-determination and promoting the unity of Latin America as a united bloc of countries, at the same time he was doing that, the United States was already envisioning the rest of Latin America, the rest of the America as its backyard. And it was already envisioning a future in which it was going to dominate and colonize all of these territories. And Simon Bolivar even said it back then in 1823. I think it was the year in which Simon Bolivar said a very famous phrase that is, the United States seems destined to placate the Americas with misery in the name of freedom. And he was absolutely correct. So that is one of the reasons why Venezuela became such a threat to the United States, because we revived the idea that we needed to be a united continent, that Latin America needed to be united, that we needed to reclaim our sovereignty, that we needed to reclaim our cultural identity, and that we needed to directly confront the Monroe Doctrine. So we have that. And then, of course, in the early 2000s, between 2002, after the coup against Hugo Chavez, in 2008, that's when Chavez began to clearly define that the Bolivarian Revolution was anti-imperialist, that the Bolivarian Revolution was anti-colonization, that the Bolivarian Revolution was anti-Zionist. So that began to take shape. And then between 2009 and 2012, that is when Chavez began to envision an actual path, a roadmap to build socialism in Venezuela, because he realized that in order to defeat US imperialism, you needed to defeat capitalism. So he began to build this roadmap, and he called the Venezuelan working class, the Venezuelan Chavistas, the grassroots organizations, he called them to organize in what we call communal councils. Communal councils are these self-government organizations in which people legislate over their own territories, over their own communities. So these communal councils began forming. And then after that, Chavez told them, okay, now all communal councils that are in the same territory or in the same community, now you need to organize in a commune. And he envisioned the commune as a higher form of government, a higher form of self-government. And he said, okay, so these communes inside these communes, we are going to build new social relations in which people are going to prioritize life before capital. People are going to prioritize community well-being over anything else. People are going to take over the means of production or create the means of production so they can actually be able to rule over their own lives and be able to rule over their own destinies and improve their living conditions. Chavez believed in the self-government, and that is what communes are today. They are an extraordinary emancipatory project that Venezuela is pushing forward. And that is why we have been attacked so much by the United States. That's why we have been facing US sanctions for almost a decade. And I like what Christian said that bombs are not just like these missiles that fall on people's houses and kill people. Bombs come in many ways. Venezuela was under a war without bombs since 2014, 2015 with US sanctions. US economic sanctions are like bombs. They destroy Venezuelan economy. They destroy people's lives. And even through those times, communes continue to build. They continue to progress. They continue to believe that building this socialist, this Venezuelan socialist way was the only way to eventually defeat U.S. imperialism and to actually become a completely free and sovereign country, and to help other people in other countries, to inspire other anti-imperialist movement in Palestine, in Iran, in Cuba, everywhere in the world, even inside the United States. Um, so I think that is the root of why Venezuela has been so centered in U.S. imperialism, in the attacks against our country, and in the fact that they decided to kidnap President Maduro because they knew that kidnapping Maduro was key to be able to control Venezuela. Venezuela has been resisting everything that the United States has done. We have been very vocal about our support for Palestine and every other struggle, and they needed something. They needed something so they could extort Venezuela, so they could have this blackmail against Venezuela, and that is why Maduro is kidnapped today. He's just and that is why we need to fight so hard to liberate Maduro, because I do believe that freeing Nicolas Maduro, freeing Celia Flores, freeing Venezuela from this extortion from the United States is going to be the key to be able to defeat what the United States and the Zionist state of Israel are doing against Cuba, against Palestine, against Iran. And I think that's going to be key. I also believe what Alison was saying earlier today, that we definitely need the people inside the United States to make their own revolution. I think we are at a moment in which we can no longer continue to fight this fight against the United States on our own, just the people in the South resisting and always trying to survive what the United States is doing. We need a strong popular movement inside the United States that takes down the fascist nature of U.S. imperialism. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. I this is like really, first of all, my comment, my reflection response is that we really need more. This is not enough. This is too short for us to discuss everything, because I'm sure that every time somebody says something, the other comrade would say, "Oh, I want to respond. I want to add this. I want to add this." And this is an amazing, great conversation that we need more of. The second thing I would say is that there is like always the United States and Israel always go on whenever a leader starts presenting a people, and a leader start presenting a real threat. They try to assassinate, kidnap, but also this is the whole question of trying to maybe humiliate. It's also the question of we're standing up, we are challenging also to humiliate. We saw that in a multiple assassination, the recent one in Iran, but they've done it in Lebanon with Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. They've done it with Palestine, with the multiple uh, Palestinian leaders historically, not only now, but historically, assassinate again and again. They've done it throughout Latin America, throughout Africa. I mean, everywhere they've done it. They've done it in the United States. I think I'm not going to go on too because this one we'll have to recall the whole history of the word. But I think also the whole question of the US, I think a question we need to discuss as well, and maybe in the future we should discuss it, is that w- what would it take more in the US to move faster? Because there are multiple ways to challenge and to protest the power in the US that's crushing everybody. And I think I agree with Dr. Tabal that it's not a reflection of the domestic policy, and I don't really think there is sort of domestic and foreign, that they are separate from each other. They're very, very much linked with each other and connected with each other, and to think about them every 4 years, elections and so on. That's not sufficient. That's not enough. That's also basically more or less a battle between in the ruling class. Some are nastier, some are less. But there is also movement that's going on. This is the belly of the beast. This is the hardest. But also the question is that how long would it take for movements to rise up, for the movement against the war in Vietnam, and how many victims have the Vietnamese? 3 to 3.5 million people, and the Vietnamese are still suffering from Agent Orange, from the scars of napalm, from all sorts of things that they stood up and they won, which was an amazing victory for all of us. But they also sacrificed a lot. But then people in the United States stood up, people in the world. So this is the question for everybody in oppositional movement to stand up and say what is needed. And we saw that towards Palestine with all sorts of, and Dr. Tabbal was in the floor. There's resources in camp and so on. It's not enough. There is more that needs to be done. We need to discuss it more. I don't know if we can discuss all of it, but maybe Alison, if you can incorporate in your remarks also, what's happening now to Celia Flores and President Maduro, and what's going on with their conditions, and what is needed to be done for and that, and then we can pivot back to Dr. Tabbal and say what is going on and what is happening. It's not enough with the prisoners. We are going on with the long campaign, but also in terms of supporting uh, the people of the region, the against the bombing, the war, the genocide. So can I turn it over to you, Alice?
Appreciative of this conversation and what we have begun to discuss. I know many others have been discussing this for months and making connections, but this is an important space that's been opened up by Teaching Palestine today. I have often been reiterating to my fellow activists and organizers here in North America or Canada and the US that the people that we've heard of today, Dr. Tabal and Christian and Andreina, are part of people living in the countries being attacked and bombed that know their jobs. Of course, they are responding to brutality from the United States primarily. And so their tasks are urgent and very apparent of how to respond. But I often have been saying, leave it to the people of Venezuela, the people of Cuba, of Lebanon, of Gaza and Palestine. Let them organize themselves and fight back. But we have our stuff to figure out. It is, our responsibility is not to figure out what they are going to do to respond in their countries, but rather what we are going to be doing in the United States and Canada. That is. And I think that is so much apparent through this conversation today and through the organizing work that needs to be done, where, we see Donald Trump and his attacks, distract people. And the major media, of course, works hand in hand with the U.S. administration to distract people from one genocide to the next, to one attack to the next. But when we take the step back, like we've been doing today, and see those connections, then we can also recall that sometimes the U.S. administration or the major media also makes those links, and we need to pay attention to them. For example, I would say that when Cuba and Venezuela have come under increasing attack since January, in both cases, there's been major media push to condemn the government of Cuba or Venezuela for harboring terrorists from Hezbollah and Hamas, for their connections directly with the government of Iran, for really being threads in this interconnected world of sanctioned countries that are working to build independence from the US dictates. And we see the major media directly attacking these countries for their support for Hezbollah or Hamas or resistance movements. And we need to recognize that those are not just, I think as Dr. Tabal said earlier, not only a rhetorical tool or like a media slander in their eyes, but are a reflection of actual conditions and actual connections, and of one of the major reasons that both Cuba and Venezuela are under attack. The naval blockade, which began against Venezuela, which is now brutally applied against Cuba, and carrying out mass punishment against the people of Cuba currently through cutting off all fuel. The naval blockade's first goal of severing was in fact Venezuela's support of Cuba through the shipment of oil and petroleum that kept the power grid on in many ways. So I think that we can really clearly see the first targets of this expanded US attack have been to break the ties between countries and resistance movements. So what is our response? I think three main demands we're working from in the Venezuela Solidarity Network that I would reiterate today are that we must mobilize and organize for US hands-off Venezuela, an end to the siege of Venezuela, which recognizes that no, there is not currently normal relations between Venezuela and the United States, as Andreina pointed to towards the end of her remarks, but also that our main demand is free President Maduro and Celia Flores now. And so to speak to that just briefly, there are organizing happening in defense of President Maduro and Celia Flores, especially leading up to what will be the next court appearance of democratically elected President Maduro, I'll add that, which is on March 26th. They're currently scheduled to appear in court for the U.S. to present its case. This trial has been postponed already once, and we are on high alert for future postponement because the U.S. government is facing challenges in building its case against President Maduro and Celia Flores on charges related to drug trafficking, essentially. And because of this, the solidarity and the pressure from outside of the prison is very important. With any case of political prisoners, of which President Maduro and Celia Flores are clearly political prisoners, it is very important that the U.S. administration and the prison industrial complex recognize that people on the outside are watching carefully. So we're encouraging people to write letters to President Maduro and Celia Flores, as well as encouraging people to take active action outside of the prison itself, where there have been a multitude of events organized by different groups, and hopefully a move towards more unified organizing, especially on the day of March 26th. So I would call on anyone that's listening, if they can go to New York City on March 26th, the Venezuela Solidarity Network is happy to connect you with people on the ground. And if you are unable to go, it is going to be an important day of online action or mobilization in your own cities. There are actions already in Tampa, Florida, in Chicago, and hopefully in a growing number of cities demanding free President Maduro and Celia Flores on March 26th. I don't believe that the U.S. case is going to, be open and shut. It's not going to happen quickly. So we need to respond urgently, but we also need to work to build more coordination between all of our different organizing. So I encourage people to follow the Venezuela Solidarity Network. I believe our information's already been posted in the chat, and to take active solidarity with President Maduro and Celia Flores, who, as I mentioned earlier today, are being held in solitary confinement from what we understand, and are also, I will say, facing challenges in paying their legal team. The US government is attempting to prevent the government of Venezuela from paying the legal fees to defend President Maduro and Celia Flores. So stay tuned for more information about any sort of necessary campaigns to ensure that they get proper defense. I think probably this has been said many times before, but I cannot reiterate enough that there's no justice in the U.S. court system. There's so many examples of this. We are seeing also no justice in the international court system, as the Zionist Israeli administration and people responsible for genocide in Gaza continue to live with impunity and operate with impunity. So we must take that justice in the streets through our actions. And I look forward to working with everyone on this call about that.
Thank you so much, Alison. I think we should post the link again, so people who missed it the first time may want to take it. And is there a separate link for the donation, or they are all in the same place? I mean, you mentioned the letters, you mentioned the donation. If there are certain things, put them up. If not, you can put up the campaign itself. Some people can write and ask, but I'm just asking to facilitate and reduce the amount of work that you need to do to respond, so you can just focus on your own more building more.
Certainly, yeah. There's not currently an active campaign for donations yet, but if that is required, we will be pushing that hard.
Okay, thank you. I would like to call on Dr. Tabbal to take your turn and also speak about that. And perhaps you can also include the role of academics and intellectuals. You mentioned that about the how people should be thinking about the connections. And I spoke at the beginning about teaching Palestine, which also applies to everybody. And that's why we're here also today. So if you can speak about all of them and speak about whatever you want to talk about in your intervention. So please go.
D'accord. I want to speak about our petition for a Palestinian denies. Okay? Can
Yes.
I speak about this? Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Our petition for Palestinian detainees held in Israeli prison is still ongoing. It has no stop, and neither has our commitment. But the brutal escalation of war in Lebanon and now in Iran has interrupted part of our public world and forced many of us to redirect our energy toward urgent emergencies, survival, and solidarity on multiple fronts. The pause is not abandonment. It is the consequences of a region was again begin set on fire. From the beginning, this petition was never only about one category of prisoners. It was about justice for all those whom colonial violence dares to rise behind prison walls. It was about the Palestinian detainees whose names are too often reduced to number, about the women and the children, too sick, too dispirited, and about emblematic figure such as Marwan Barghouti, whose imprisonment has come to symbolize the imprisonment of an entire people. Our campaign call for release of Barghouti have continued internationally, presenting him as a central figure of Palestine political resistance. But this struggle also speak to something larger. It connected Palestinian to other geographics or resistance, especially in Latin America, where the language of sovereignty and imperialism and political imprisonment has long been part of the same historical puzzle. The case of Nicolas Maduro and Cecilia Flores has also generated petition and solidarity calls portraying them as political target of US imperial power. Whether on speaks of Palestinian prisoners and Israeli jails or political figure attack in Latin America, the same underlying logic often applies, criminalize resistance, isolate samples, and breaks collective movement by targeting their leaders. This is interpretation drawn from the border solidarity campaign linking Palestinian and Venezuela. That is why our petition must be understood not as an isolated humanitarian gesture, but a part of a wider political and more map. The prisoner of Palestine is not alone. Their struggle echoes across the Middle East and across Latin America, wherever people have resist to the occupation, resist to domination, sanctions, cops, or foreign control. Voilà, c'est ça. Marwan Barghouti is one name among many prisoners, but his stand is longer tradition of imprisoned resistant figure whose because their political meaning cannot be easily divided. Fadwa Barghouti herself, his wife, has described building international ties in Europe, South Africa, Latin America, the United States, and across to the Arab world to defend Palestinian political prisoners. Today, the war in Lebanon and the widening regional violence have interpreted the rhythm of our campaign, but they have also confirmed the strong at its heart. These struggles are connected. The decided, the bombed, and the displaced are all caught inside the name machinery of domination. Our petition remains alive because the cause remains alive and will be returned to it with even greater forces, carrying with us the certainly that the freedom of Palestine denies is inseparable from the freedom of all the people strongly against oppression from the Middle East to Latin America. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tabbal. We have only 2 minutes left, so I want to just take the time to thank you all for coming here to speak to us and to speak to our audiences and our students. This was a very fruitful and rich and important conversation. And there is a lot of information in it. We will be having many more conversations and discussions because the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian prisoners is coming up on April 17th. We will be hosting the prisoner solidarity delegation, the 10th anniversary that went to Palestine. We will be hosting many freed Palestinian prisoners, Marwan Barghouti, and many of the Palestinian leaders in prison. The Palestinian prisoner leadership have all been deleted from the list of freed Palestinian prisoners every single time there has been a prisoner exchange, and that also applies to the lukewarm or non-support by the Palestinian Authority. This is very important to support, and Marwan Barghouti has been beaten up in prison, and so have the rest of the leaders. People have died in prison. So this is a very important issue. The other thing that I wanted to stress as well, the petition that we as Palestinian and Arab women have written to support Celia Flores and demand her release. And also that it is International Women's History Month, and we are surprised that many feminists throughout the world have not actually picked it up and supported it. So we would like them to get on it and support as well. And we would like definitely to demand in this to the freedom and immediate release of President Maduro and Celia Flores, and condemn in the strongest tone the kidnapping, the piracy of the president and Celia Flores and of Venezuela. Immediate stop to the war against Iran, against Lebanon, Palestine, and also we haven't even mentioned Yemen. We should mention that blockade against Cuba and hands off. U.S. and Israel's hands off of everywhere around the world, and allowing everybody around the world to fight for justice, for freedom, for peace of mind, for peace. And we believe that will happen, as Andrina said, Venceremos, and also I think Christian said that too. Thank you so much for coming here, for joining us, and have a great day, great time, and we will have you back. Okay, take care.